Happy Thursday. It is Therapy Thursday. I am Dr. Triffy. This is the Transforming Trauma podcast. How are you? I am a licensed psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia, but I am from Dominica in the Caribbean. Not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. I say this every time. We love them, but they're a different country. We speak English and the French Creole, and they speak Spanish. So, different country. I show up on Thursdays to share. My intention is to help whoever gets the opportunity to listen and participate with me. A chance to learn some skills using trending topics, learn some skills to think better, feel better, and do better. I also want to make psychology less weird or woo woo or unusual to a lot of my people. They say charity begins at home. So no matter who I have helped and served over these 26 years, I feel it's my duty to give some of my time back to my people of Dominica. So this is why I show up on Thursdays. Now, tonight I am talking about an issue that is not uncommon at all around the world, but it is a bit unusual for us in Dominica, I would say, to have so many cases of sexual abuse popping up. And I want to ask the question tonight, is sexual abuse of children in Dominica right now a public health crisis? Do we need to consider it a public health crisis? So tonight I want to share a few stories that have hit social media, that have hit the legal system in Dominica. I also want to review a video from the director of public prosecution in Dominica, along with the minister of security. And I want to get your thoughts. Every problem has a solution. In Dominica, our elders teach us, Sini Bobo Ini Logan. This I just said to you in Creole is a Powerball. A Powerball in Dominica is a nugget of wisdom. It's a proverb. It's a parable. It's a lesson that's been distilled from big lessons. And our ancestors gave us many of those. And that was the way I think they transferred the secrets. That's the way they transferred their secrets of longevity. I'm going to boast again, Dominica has the second highest number of centenarians in the Western Hemisphere. If you didn't know, now you know. Hmm? So, part of the way our ancestors and our elders lived was with a certain mindset that was ruled and trained and guided by these power balls. So, I'm starting from that premise that if there's a problem, as the elders taught, there is a solution. Perhaps you just haven't found it yet, but every problem has a solution. Sini bobo ini logo. Okay, so welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in, share the live. Let me know where you're listening to me from tonight. This is a heavy subject, but I tell you who it's heavier for. This subject is heavier for the children tonight, all the children tonight in Dominica who are uncomfortable in their skin, who don't know how they're going to really maneuver tonight because somebody might be touching them in a way that they don't want to be touched. So I appreciate that the subject is heavy. I appreciate too that many of us have had these experiences of adults and people who are much older than us approaching us in sexual ways that didn't feel good. And there are laws to govern these things. And so, as we keep hearing of story after story after story after story, I am not one to get compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is where you're like, you hear it so much, You start doing this, wah, 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 like you start zoning out. Oh, I don't want to hear this anymore. The thing is, the poor little child tonight, they can't zone it out. And that's why you have adults and legal systems to take care of children. So, I want to read you a few stories. This one is from July 14th, and it's from Nature Island News. Dominica is called the Nature Island of the Caribbean. Of the world. Headline: West Coast man arrested and charged for abduction and sexual related offenses. West Coast man. He appeared in court on a charge of abduction, indecent assault, and unlawful sexual contact with a 7-year-old girl earlier this year. 7-year-old. Second story, July 11th. The name of the offender, I'm not going to say, I don't care to repeat their name, but offender X of Marigot is now an inmate at the Dominica State Prison in Stock Farm for the crime of unlawful sexual connection and indecent assault. This one happened May 2018. May 2018. His attorney says to the judge, "We ask your ladyship to temper justice with mercy. The virtual complainant at the time of the incident was not a minor," suggesting that the person who brought the case was not a minor technically at the time. So let's just let it go. She wasn't a minor. Next case, July 5th. Convicted rapist loses his appeal against conviction and sentence. So this man, today's Thursday, so I'm usually gentle on Thursdays. This man actually appealed his conviction. In 2016, the gentleman was then age 37, was convicted for the R word, incest, and indecent assault of his sister. You heard me right. Of his sister. June 27, a former national footballer slapped with several sex-related charges. Several. Next, 67-year-old man pleads guilty to unlawful sexual connection with a 6-year-old in 2020. With a 6-year-old in 2020. 67. Here's what the lawyer asks. The lawyer asks, can we continue to have him continue? Continue, sir. Continue means he's been out on bail. Can we continue to have him on bail until his sentencing? Continue to have him on bail. And since there's no sexual offender registry, he's out on bail. Where? In the community. June 23rd, a jury finds a Salisbury man guilty of buggery on a young boy. How old is the young boy? 12. 12 years old. Note that the offense took place in 2016. What year is this? It is 2022. 2022. A boy, right? I know a lot of people assume that it's the little girls who are getting abused, 12-year-old boys, somebody's 12-year-old son. Next one. Now, this is the one that got my goat. Like, I just couldn't. After that, that's when I started speaking up. Like, I just could not. I couldn't anymore. Court gives 22-year-old who pleaded guilty to unlawful sexual connection a suspended sentence. Court gives 22-year-old who pleaded guilty to unlawful sexual connection a suspended sentence. He goes on to say the gentleman can, well, I say gentleman, but the man can count his lucky stars. He can count his lucky stars after he was given a suspended jail sentence for 2 years and 10 months after he pleaded guilty for unlawful sexual connection with somebody's 14-year-old daughter. Back when? In 2019. 2019. What year is it? 2022. For his guilty plea, y'all, for his guilty plea, he got a reduction of 2 years and his mandatory one-third reduction, which brought it to 3 years, 2 months. Just more semantics, shenanigans. Bottom line is he's back in the community. Bottom line is he's back in the community. There is no sexual offender registry. So, except if somebody saw this article, or except if they announced his name on the radio, which I don't know. If y'all heard it, you can let me know. But with no sexual registry, he's back out in the community doing what? We think working and being a good citizen, we think. Hmm? The judge says to the young man, this is your second chance. Because apparently, this is your second chance, yo. She says, this is your second chance. Why is it his second chance? She says, you won't get a third. What you did to this young lady was terrible. But I'm giving you a second chance. You won't get a third. And you used to accompany her to the beach. This was a significant breach of trust. That's what it was. A breach of trust. That's all it was. So, look, I stopped after June the 2nd because that headline was update, popular entertainer arrested and charged on sexual matters and granted bail. And granted bail. I appreciate so much that the director of public prosecution came to DBS radio, and I will share the video with you guys so you can, if you haven't yet seen it, share your thoughts on what you think. Do we think we're doing enough? Is it a public health crisis? What do we need to do about it? Again, sini bobo ini logan. So, yeah, I want us to listen to the video. I want to thank the Minister of National Security and Home Affairs, Minister Blackmore, and Ms. Sherma Dalrymple. She's the Director of Public Prosecution, because I've been saying I'm yet to hear somebody with a voice that can echo, explain what is going on, because the community is so confused by all of these reports and what seems to be suspended sentences, sentences that light sentences, 4 years. Mm? No, I would love to understand why they're getting those kinds of sentences, especially after you hear what the director of public prosecution says about the laws. Okay? So I'm going to let you listen to that with me, and I want to share my thoughts.
In respect of the laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica
So, one second.
governing sexual offenses.
Hi, Olivia. How are you? What's up, Mama? What's up? We have to solve our problems together. So, this is Miss Dalrymple, and she is talking about the statutes, about the laws that govern sexual abuse and what the consequences are, what the legal consequences are, what the statutes are. And I want you to listen and let me know what your thoughts are. Okay?
Firstly, we must start at what governs sexual offenses in the Commonwealth of Dominica. And the robust legislation which my colleague, the PS, has referred to is the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1036 of the 2017 Consolidated Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica. My office, having done a comparative analysis of the Sexual Offences Act of both the CARICOM and OECS jurisdictions, can firmly say that our act in Dominica is the most stringent and comprehensive Sexual Offences Act.
Okay, so when I heard that, I thought to myself, if that is the case, if in Dominica we have the most stringent and we have the most robust Sexual Offences Act in the Caribbean, based on these, uh, number one, based on the number of cases that seem to be popping up, number one, and the sentencing I'm hearing, either somebody's confused in interpreting the law, or I really don't want to see what the other islands' statutes of sexual abuse are. Based on what I'm reading, based on what I'm reading and hearing, if ours is the most robust, I don't want to see theirs. And if it is so robust, why is it not a deterrent? Clearly, it's not acting as a deterrent because there are too many cases. And why is it not acting as a deterrent? What's happening now in the justice system, in the enforcement system of this very robust law? Because we can have as robust a law as we want. We can say, hey, if you drink my cup of tea, this is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. We can say that all we want. We can have a very robust law, but are those laws being enforced to the letter? And if they are not, what else are the other problems that are contributing to what, at least, look, we don't have the numbers and we don't have the research. I certainly don't have the clinical data, but what I'm seeing and hearing is called face value, right? So face value analysis is like, this is a lot. There's a lot of this going on.
It must be brought to the attention of the public that in 2016, the legislature deemed it necessary to make certain amendments to our Sexual Offences Act. What is also very important to note about these amendments is that numerous offences were also added in the Sexual Offences Act, and the penalties were significantly increased.
Okay, so 2016 is the important year here. Numerous other categories of offenses were added. So maybe things that did not used to be considered criminal are now considered criminal. That's what I'm hearing. Hmm?
The Sexual Offences Act is not discriminatory nor gender biased. Therefore, the Sexual Offences Act is aimed at challenging society's current attitudes towards sexual offences and to transform the approach individuals place on sexual offences while catering for practicable gender equality and protection for both minors and adults. Some of the penalties which are found pursuant to the Sexual Offences Act as follows: rape, unlawful sexual connection, incest, unlawful sexual intercourse, gross indecency, indecent assault, burglary, grooming, prostitution, voyeurism, abduction, unlawful detention of a person with intent to have sexual intercourse, bestiality, procuring a minor to have sexual intercourse, to name a few. I have listed 14 thus far, and there are many more offences under the legislation. Pursuant to the Act, all these sexual offences have prescribed maximum sentences for offences. For example, rape carries the penalty of 25 years imprisonment, while rape of a child under the age of 12 or an elderly person carries the penalty of life imprisonment. Noteworthy is that whether complainant is under the age of 12 or is an elderly person, or where the offense is committed by two or more persons.
Okay, y'all, so pause. Pause. So you mean that 67-year-old man, as a community, we need to wait and see if this man gets, according to this very robust law, this person should be sentenced when it's sentencing time with life in prison. That's what I heard. Is that what you heard? Let me know. The person who violated the 7-year-old, my expectation is when that case has run itself through the justice system, this person should get, according to this law, very robust law, life in prison. Hmm? So I'm going to be watching and listening for the results of those cases because we have a very robust law as of 2016 that needs to be adhered to.
Or committed in a heinous way, or where the complainant was pregnant or became pregnant because of the offense, or the offender has been previously convicted of rape, that person may be liable on conviction to imprisonment for the remainder of their natural life.
Okay, so pause. That person may. That person may. If that's how the law reads, that means they also may not. Is it may or they will? Because if it's may, that means they also may not.
This section is important as it shows the upward movement of the punishment based on the severity and the holistic circumstances surrounding the act of rape. There is also the offense of unlawful sexual connection, which is the introduction to any extent into the vagina or the anus of any person of any part of the body of any person or any object held or manipulated by any other person otherwise than for bona fide medical purposes, or connection between the mouth or tongue of any person and any part of the genitalia or anus of any other person. Unlawful sexual connection carries a maximum of sentence of 14 years. The sentence for unlawful sexual connection carries the maximum also of 25 years where an object is held or manipulated by another.
Okay, so I'm pausing because I'm hearing the maximum, but I am not hearing a minimum. Is there a minimum? Is there a threshold? Is there a of at least? Because if what I'm hearing is it carries a maximum of 25 years, is there a minimum? Or can it be like this dude who got his 2 year suspended sentence and that is okay too? I'm trying to understand the robustness of the law. I want to understand it clearer because I didn't hear a minimum. I didn't hear an at least for that one. I heard carries a maximum. Okay. And maybe I didn't understand it well. So I need help.
The person in the vagina or anus of another individual. There is also the offense which of unlawful sexual intercourse, which carries a maximum sentence of 14 years, where the minor is 14 years of age or under, but under the age, sorry, where the minor is 14 years of age and older. But where the minor is under the age of 14 years, the sentence is 25 years imprisonment. I'll repeat in respect of that. Where the minor is 14 years of age, the maximum sentence that can be given is 14 years and under is 25 years. And where the minor is 14 years, is under the age of 16 years, the maximum which can be given is 14 years imprisonment.
Okay, this part I didn't understand well because there was a lot of language, there was a lot of words, and it was hard for me to follow. And so that's something I might have to read myself to see. But again, I'm hearing maximum. I'm not sure yet if I heard mandatory and if there's a mandatory minimum yet. Okay. All right. Because you need to have a, for me, if you say, well, up to the maximum is 0 to that maximum, so meaning it could be 0, but it might be my misunderstanding, and I really need some help understanding. I think the community will need some help understanding because I read a lot and it was a little hard for me to follow that.
It must be highlighted that the act is so stringent that according to section 36A, I believe that this is the most important amendment that was made to the legislation, that is section 36A, that where someone is convicted of a sexual offense, the court can give a maximum sentence of 2/3 of the sentence stated in the legislation. For example, I'll put it simple. If the maximum sentence is stated as 15 years, the court is mandated to give a sentence of 10 years and not go any lower.
Okay, so this is where I think I hear the minimum. And I hope I'm correct. Okay, the director says the court is mandated, it must give at least 2/3 of whatever the maximum is. At least 2/3 of whatever the maximum is. Therefore, if the maximum is 15 years, they must give the person at least 10 years. Huh?
So the court is mandated to give a sentence of 2/3 of the maximum sentence. And section 36A, is a section of the law that strays away from sentencing guidelines. Lately, there has been a lot of talk about guidelines and what are sentencing guidelines. Let me briefly tell you about sentencing guidelines. In 2019, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court passed guidelines to deal with sentencing in various offenses. The purpose of these guidelines was to allow for consistency and consideration of the proper facts and circumstances in passing sentence. According to the guidelines, all sentences must be clearly expressed and the reasoning given. Factors taken into consideration, whether as aggravating or mitigating factors, should be set out as part of the sentencing remarks. Any departure from the guidelines must be explained as part of the reasoning. The guidelines for sexual offenses are being used by the court in sentencing for sexual matters. And these guidelines are available online. If you log on to the ECC Courts website, this is eccourts.org. That's the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court website. All sentencing guidelines are stated on the website. It must also be noted that these guidelines are very mathematical and differs to the pre-2019 method of sentencing, where allowance was made for attorneys and the court to make reference to case law and to other sentences passed in other jurisdictions. The sentencing guidelines we have now for sexual offenses, they do not make room for that. What we can do is we can refer to the statute. Now, in 2016, our law was amended to include section 36A, which speaks to a departure from guidelines. That is, it gives the court the ability to give a mandatory minimum sentence, which is 2/3 of the maximum sentence as stated. And it gives you circumstances when this can be employed by the court. The aggravating factors listed under section 36A of the Sexual Offences Act are as follows. The accused committed the offense in the company of another person or persons. At the time of or immediately before or after the commission of the offense, the accused used or threatened to use a weapon. At the time of or immediately before or after the commission of the offense, the accused caused bodily harm to the complainant beyond that inherent in the commission of the offense. D. The accused confined or restrained the complainant before or after the commission of the offense. The accused, in committing the offense, abused a position of trust, authority, or dependency. The accused is a member of the same family as the complainant. The complainant is a minor under the age of 16 years or an elderly person. The complainant contracted HIV or any other sexually transmitted disease or was made pregnant as a result of the offense, and the complainant has a physical disability or mental disorder. So what the law is saying, according to section 36A, that where any of these factors exist, the court can give a mandatory minimum sentence, which is 2/3 of the maximum penalty stated by the law. So, put simply, the court cannot go lower than 2/3 of the maximum sentence as stated by the law. So, this is how stringent our Sexual Offences Act is and how serious the legislators have looked at sexual offenses in Dominica.
I want to pause there and say thank you to Mrs. Dalrymple for this, because I get the clarification that now, so now what I'm hearing is that the justice system, when I say justice system, I mean whoever is doing the sentencing, whoever is doing the sentencing now gets to look at these statutes and say, you get the maximum, or you must get at least 2/3 of that maximum penalty. You get that maximum, whatever the maximum is, per charge. And there, she listed 14. She said there were about 14. and each one comes with how many years you gotta do. If it's life, there's some that are for life. Yeah, if the child is under a certain age or if it's an elderly, very vulnerable, the most vulnerable. Hmm? So then, where is the breakdown? Because that's what, as a community, we have to be going after. If the law is saying this, but people are coming out with suspended sentences, that's where I'm starting to see now a hole. Hmm? I'm seeing a hole. And then she's going to talk about some other potential holes in the community that must be addressed for this problem to get lower and lower and lower.
The fight against sexual abuse against minors cannot only be fought against by the prosecution, the police, and the courts. The approach which has to be taken is that medical practitioners, welfare officers, teachers, parents, and guardians have to be on board in that fight. The public must also be cognizant of the fact that the Act has placed duties on parents, guardians, teachers, medical practitioners, registered nurses, and midwives. Section 31A of the Act places a mandatory reporting requirement. I will repeat that, Section 31A. This is an amendment that was put in 2016, places a mandatory reporting requirement on the following individuals: parent or guardians of minors, an individual who has actual custody, charge, or control of a minor, an individual who has temporary custody, care, charge, or control of a minor for special purposes, as his attendant, employer, or teacher, or in any other capacity, a medical practitioner, or a registered nurse or midwife who has performed a medical examination in respect of a minor. This section 31A, which creates the mandatory reporting requirement, is far reaching. Basically, anyone who has guardianship, care, and control over a minor has a duty placed on them to report incidents of sexual abuse against a minor.
This is very important and one of the most positive additions, I think, that they made in 2016, where you have a mandated duty to report if you have jurisdiction over a child at any time. The child is in your Sunday school, you're the Sunday school teacher, and the little girl comes to you, little boy comes to you and tells you, this person did that to me. You have a legal obligation to report this to the authorities. That is all you do. You call the authorities or you go into the authorities and you make the report. You could be the babysitter. You could be, like she says here, the guardians, the parents, the custodians, teachers. I didn't hear religious, like pastor or priest, and I'm not sure if there's a reason why not. But I think religious and clergy should be included in that mandated reporting uh, responsibility because they hear a lot. They're like the therapists of Dominica. They're who people go to and talk about their problems with. Okay? And yes, there is a duty for confidentiality, but even up here, even with as a therapist, I have a duty to keep what a client says to me private. They have a legal right to confidentiality, but there must be exemptions. There must be caveats. If you have child sexual abuse, elder abuse, if you have a child who comes to you and says, I want to commit suicide or I want to kill somebody else, those should release the clergy person from their duty to remain to keep the information confidential. So I'm not sure if she just didn't mention it, but the religious people in Dominica are our de facto counselors and therapists. And so they must have a duty also to report. They must have a duty to report. Okay, now I want to hear about the consequences, because now it's great that we have people who now you must report. But what do we do if they don't? I want to hear that.
Now, this section has also been criminalized. A breach of this section can result in a fine of $30,000 or an imprisonment for a term of up to 5 years. So, this section is criminalized. The prosecution can bring an individual who does not report an incident of sexual abuse against a minor to the court, where they can be fined up to $30,000 and can be imprisoned up to 5 years. Further,
Okay, who's going to enforce that? It's great to have the robust law. Who's going to tell the babysitter who did not report to the authorities? Hmm? Who's going to tell her, yeah, you didn't tell, so I'm going to charge you $30,000 as a fine? When are we going to enforce it? It's beautiful to have it on the books. It's sweet. Who's going to do that? Are we depending on who? Who is going to do that? The police? Is there a body in Dominica? Has a group been identified that does not really, that can have a little bit of impartiality? Impartiality means you don't really know the people, you're trying your best not to be so close to the situation, people who can be objective, people who can be like, okay, this happened, the law says they pay a $30,000 fine, they pay a $30,000 fine. Remember, this is Dominica, where all of us know each other and all of us are related somehow through blood or marriage or through my friend knows this person. Do we have a body, or is it left to the cops? Are the cops trained to, who's really policing that piece of the legislation? Who's keeping their eye on if people don't report, if the teacher does not report, they actually pay the $30,000 fine? Because with these things, unless there are really consequences that are enacted, it's not that easy to ensure that you follow through with the letter of the law. So, who's educating all of the mandated reporters? Yo, you better do this for them. And when it doesn't happen, there are really consequences so that other people see, yeah, these are the consequences and this really happened. So now, even if I feel uncomfortable, listen, most therapists, this is one of the worst days of their life. When you hear that a client comes to you and tells you something like this, I've had to do it many times, where you feel the icky feeling in your belly because you are mandated to report this. And so you've got to call, and we call either 911 or we call the Department of Family and Children Services. So that's why I'm asking, is there a separate body that the mandated reporter must call or must make that report to? Because we call it the Department of Family and Children Services, and they have investigators who go out and check, really investigate, follow up, follow through to see. I suppose the equivalent in Dominica would be the welfare department. Is that the procedure? What's the procedure now for the mandated reporters who, when the little 6-year-old comes and says, this man in the village did this, my uncle did that to me? Yes, they must make a report. Who are they making it to? Okay? And once they make it, who follows up on it? And once they follow up on it and it goes to court, is the judge actually sentencing the offender with the at least the minimum? That at least the minimum two-thirds. Because somebody, like I said earlier this year, went home with a suspended sentence. So let's keep going.
The seriousness of the Sexual Offences Act is also made apparent by Section 31B, which creates an offence where, in circumstances, an individual willfully prevents or obstructs the prosecution of a matter under the Act. In respect of obstruction prosecution, a person who is found guilty will be fined up to $50,000 and can be sentenced for up to 5 years imprisonment. So,
Okay.
where an individual decides to pervert the course of justice to prevent the case from going through in the courts, the Act also mandates that this is a criminal offense and someone can be charged up to $50,000 and be sentenced up to 5 years imprisonment. It must also be noted that in the Commonwealth of Dominica, there is also the Criminal Law and Procedure Act, which speaks.
Okay, so this one says that if you obstruct the investigation of a case, you could be fined 50,000 bucks and you could face whatever. Tell me if you believe for real that there are not people obstructing justice when their nephew gets identified as a pedophile, their cousin, their friend's child. You think nobody tries to pull a little string? And who's keeping an eye on the people pulling strings? So I get it. The law is very robust. Are we really enforcing the law or implementing it? I mean, who's really keeping an eye on who is supposed to be checking to see? Because if nobody is, then all we have are words on paper. It's pretty, it's beautiful, yeah, it's robust on paper. But if it's so robust on paper, why do we have people, and it's not 2014 this happened, this is 2022. Why does a man who this judge says this is your second chance, meaning you've done it before, but you, this person who's done it before, who as a psychologist I'm telling you is going to do it again, I'm giving you a second chance with a suspended sentence. Who is that for? And who perhaps obstructed justice to get this kind of sentence to play out? And is that person going to be charged that $50,000? So I get it. I appreciate a lot that in 2016 we created what? When you do a comparative analysis to the other islands in the CARICOM and the OECS, perhaps we can say ours is the most robust. Is it serving our people though? Are we really using it the way it's supposed to be used? Because if we are not, then essentially we're fooling our people. Essentially, we're saying, but look, 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 see what I have. But then in reality, we do something else. So, what do we do with that? Because maybe that's where the problem is, because the problem is ballooning out of control. So, we've done step one with a beautiful, robust set of statutes. Now it's time to move up to step two and implement and actually, step three, enforce those statutes. Or else it's a waste of time and paper because somebody's child cannot go to sleep tonight. Because somebody out there knows they're not going to get that mandated 2/3 out of the up to maximum or potentially maximum, or you can get up to whatever. You see?
Speaks to perverting the course of justice. And this is an indictable offense, and the prosecution also has the ability to charge under this act as well, where the prosecution of a sexual matter is being obstructed.
Is the prosecutor prosecuting though? Is the prosecutor prosecuting though?
Members of the public, it has to be impressed on you that the law exists to rid our society of these sexual offenses. Your help is, however, needed in implementing this comprehensive act that we have in Dominica. For us to be successful in this fight, everyone has to be involved. The prosecution and the police are bringing the cases before the court so that justice can be obtained. But the work can't be done unless members of our society take on their responsibilities and report the incidents of abuse and ensure that they work with the prosecution and the police in securing convictions. At this juncture, it is significant to note that over the past 2 years, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has had a 100% conviction rate for sexual matters that have been tried in the High Court. I, along with my state attorneys, work tirelessly in ensuring that convictions are obtained in the High Court. Also, when matters are brought before the Court of Appeal, we also go over and beyond in defending these appeals. As of recent, we were successful in a sexual appeal before the Court of Appeal. That is the matter of the state and Alison Woodman. A lot of victims have also complained of delays in the prosecution of matters, and we have decided, with consultation with the PS, that the best way to deal with that is through the reintroduction of paper committals. And we started doing paper committals in 2020. This is a process whereby the minors are not made to give evidence in the magistrate's court. What happens is that we present their statements in court and the matters are sent to the High Court. So this is a tool that we have been using to prevent matters from being drawn out through preliminary inquiries. The downside to this is that frequently parents.
Okay, so this issue with what Miss Dalrymple just said about paper committal, which allow children to not have to essentially face their predator. You know, they get to give their statement away from watching this nasty person who did something really horrific to them in a court. You know? That issue of paper committal was being used, but as she said here, it hasn't since about 2020. It's time to bring it back. And I think I would love to hear from Ms. Dalrymple a date. When is it coming back? When? One of the things I learned is that there was not, almost like they couldn't find someone. I don't know if that's correct, but there was nobody they could assign to that task. We need somebody on that task. We need somebody handling that. We need somebody handling that. The kids need somebody handling that. So that issue of paper committal, when exactly, what date are we reinstituting the use of paper committal? So little children don't have to go back and face their abusers if they don't have to.
Of minors come to my office to indicate that they are no longer interested in matters. This is a downside. We have to ensure that the wheels of justice are allowed to turn. Over the past 2 years, from February 2020 to present, only one individual came to see me in respect of noting what was the status of their child's matter. But in that time frame, 11 individuals have visited me to have meetings with me in respect of discontinuing matters concerning their children.
I'm going to pause this here because this right here completely made me sad and disappointed in our parents in Dominica who, for whatever reason, money, somebody got to them and gave them a little, like one of the cases I'm just reading here, he attempted to essentially pay off the parents. Essentially pay off the parents. Hmm? What could possibly be more important than your child's care and your child's future? I would say that perhaps I'm going to give the parents some slack, cut them a little slack and say, if it's one of the cases in here is from 2016, it's, it's 2022. 6 years is too long, courts of Dominica, to have this stuff rigmaroling, lingaling. It's too much time. There's too much time. There's too much time between the commission of the offense and by the time you've made your way through the judicial system to get to sentencing. That's too long. That's too long. Think about this. You have a child, perhaps, who starts, or this event happens when they're 8 years old. 8 years old, you're a child. A child thinks very differently than a teenager. Hmm? If she's 8 when this happens and this stuff drags on for this long, do you think, do you know many teenagers who want to go stand up in front of people and talk about their body and keep having to show up and deal with this stuff? So the length of time between when the act is committed and when the case actually gets, to its fruition, to its end, it's made its way through the judicial system, that needs to be faster. That needs to be faster because we're prolonging the trauma for this child, for this victim. That's 6 years of unresolved yuckiness when maybe it could be one, two, max. Huh? One, two, max. Because I don't think the pressure is only on the parents, because if you have a child if there's so much time passing, the child wants to move on with their life. They want to do what regular teenagers are doing now. And so now, I have to go back. I have to keep going back to this yucky thing. I have to keep going back to this yucky thing. And the parents are living with the kids day in, day out. So they see their anxiety. You see your child's stomach start to roll. You see them start feeling uncomfortable about having to go back to court and back to court and back to court. So it's not as simple as, well, maybe somebody paid them off. I do believe that happens. But I think the length of time, allows a lot of time for a person to change their mind because they're not as angry anymore, perhaps. My biggest worry is for the kids because, again, a child having to hold that trauma that is not yet resolved. How many of you have gone through a divorce or you've broken up a relationship and it took a long time for you to figure things out? Was that comfortable? This is a similar experience for a child who's having to hold that kind of uncertainty for this long. and their life keeps getting interrupted each time they have to go back to court, back to court, back to court, back to court. Oh, it got postponed. Oh, it got whatever. I don't know the legalese, you know. But I think we have to think about that as perhaps one of the contributing factors to why 11, she says, families came and said, dismiss, just end this case. Stop, we're done, we're done, we're not doing it anymore. And one followed through. That says a lot. No, parents, you all need to take your shots because how do you give up on finding resolution for your child? How do you give up? How do you give up on your child? What amount of money could be enough for you to betray your child? You're betraying the spirit of a child if you make that kind of arrangement with somebody else, thinking the little money they might give you is it going to last forever? Do you know how quickly money goes if you don't know how to deal with it, if you don't know how to work with it? And so, yes, you take the money, but there's going to be a part inside of your heart that's going to stay needing redemption, Mogadiu. Because you know, even if your child doesn't know the details, you know you sold your child up the river. You know you betrayed your child. And you are the one, more so than even the police, you are the one with that natural, divine responsibility to shepherd, to care for, to protect this child. So, look, if I'm talking to you as a parent or you know somebody who's in that position, yeah, we need a little bit of coming back to our conscience, coming back to our conscience, coming back to our conscience, because that's essentially sacrificing your child. You have sacrificed your child on the altar of greed or on the altar of laziness. You know, we have to do better. Parents, we have to do better.
This is alarming. We have to ensure that we allow the matters to be brought to court so that the children can get justice. I will again add, yes, life sentences can be imposed for rape, as we spoke, or as I spoke of earlier, under the 2016 amendments that we have. Provision is made for a life sentence for rape. This is very important, where the child is of a certain age, where it's an elderly person who was raped, we can impose a life sentence for rape. And this act makes provision for the mandated minimum sentence. In
Okay,
closing, it has to
so
be emphasized
so
that the tool exists to rid our.
before she closes, there's a difference between the act makes provision for life, hmm, a life sentence, and it also makes provision for at least two-thirds of the maximum sentence. No, we need somebody to actually do it. We need the judges to actually do it instead of sending people home saying, I've given you a second chance and there won't be a third. And you're giving him the second chance without any intervention. When I say that, I mean we did not send him to a rehabilitation center where he can get therapy to understand what's happening. Why are you doing this, bro? Why are you doing this? What behaviors can you use instead so that this does not happen again? Or at least to lower your chance of offending again. We can't just release people out on the streets because we feel sorry for them. You can't release them back on the streets because He's 22. Oh, he has his whole life ahead of him. Oh, he's a father. Because those arguments, they're not going to stop the little 6 year old the next time from him hurting the 6 year old. That's not going to work. Perpetrators, people who do this stuff, don't stop just because we talk hard to them or we talk soft to them. That's not how it works. And it's going to happen again. If you had a tracker on this man, you would see it happening. If you had a tracker on this man, you would see it happening. So the judges, the people who are enforcing this robust law on paper with a lot of latitude, a lot of room for up to, mm, can give, well, what determines the can give, depending on how handsome the lawyer is, the defendant's lawyer is, or how much they smile at me today, or I don't know, if I like you, I don't know. There's so many factors that could interfere with, they can give them up to.
Society of the sexual offenses that are now on the upsurge. That is the Sexual Offences Act. This act has been around since 2016. It is comprehensive and it is very stringent in respect of the penalties that are imposed for various offenses. I listed 14 offenses today. There are many more offenses under the act. What we need to do as a society to fight this, to fight the prevalence of these offenses, is to ensure that we carry out our obligations and our responsibilities which the act has placed on us. Do not shy away from reporting.
Okay, I'm going to pause here because this is beautifully said. And that is for everybody, from captain down to cook. Parents, your child cannot come home and tell you something like this happened, and you, because you're uncomfortable and you don't want to hurt your neighbor's feelings, you don't follow through with reporting. You are out of order. You are out of order. Teachers, you have an FHLE, when your life and family life education curriculum to teach in the schools to train your students how to use their words to report these things, how to use their words to actually decrease the likelihood that they get picked on and they get identified by a predator. You know some of the things predators look for? They look for children without a father in the home, children without a male presence. They look for the shy kid. They look for the one that's very nice. Your nice little child that you train in your home, that you train to say, hello, good morning, how are you? Are you well? That's who they're looking for. They're not looking for the one that looks like they tapage, like they might tell. They're not going to look for that one. And they're good. This is what these people do, so they know what they're looking for. Okay? So you teachers, you already hit on the twin parents. You already know you're the main teacher. You have to teach your kids what is good touch, what is bad touch. Bad touch, y'all, is any touch that does not feel good for your child. That's all your child needs to tell you for you to say, okay, baby girl, okay, baby boy, tell me more about this. Tell me more. Let's talk about this. That's all you need. Bad touch for a child is any kind of touch that doesn't feel good for them. And we have to teach our kids to tell people in the moment so they can take care of themselves. No, don't touch me like that. I don't like that. I'm going to tell my mom you touched me like this. I'm going to tell my mom you said I look like XYZ and you think I'm XYZ. If your child feels yucky or weird, that's all they need because that's their little intuition telling them this person does not have good intentions for them. A puppy knows when you have bad intentions for it. Kids know that too. They sense it, but they don't always have the words for it. So that's why we have to trust our kids when they tell us, I didn't like that. I did not like that. I don't know why, but I just didn't like it. So that's a in-home training. It has to start at home. And they go out to school. There's a curriculum that teaches life skills to children. I hear many of the teachers feel uncomfortable teaching it. Then you don't need to be teaching somebody's child. What's the point of teaching them pi this and square root of that if you cannot teach them how to take care of themselves and their bodies? That's part of your curriculum also. What do you mean? Are you a child that you as an adult teacher says, I don't feel comfortable teaching life skills? Are you a child? And if you are a child in your head, you have a job to do. You have a job to do. Forget about the pervert. The pervert is not going to change. That 22-year-old is not going to change, yo. If I had to bet, I'm not going to bet on him changing. So who's got to change? Things in his environment have to change. For example, he does not have to have access to minor children. That's what has to change. And so who does that? Parents, you do that. But judicial system and legal system and public safety system, if there is no sexual offender registry, if there's no sex offender registry and the community doesn't know this guy is on the list, how do they know to protect the children from him? How will they know? Yes, the law is robust, but is it complete? Is it complete? We make our way through the legal system. He goes home. Let's suppose he even spends his time, spends his two-thirds. Let's suppose they give him his bare minimum because that's where I don't know what it is. The judges are like, okay, well, bare minimum. We'll give you the minimum. We'll give you the at least. If we could send you home like that 26, 22-year-old, we're going to send you home. But we're going to give you the bare minimum, your two-thirds of your 15 years or whatever it is. You go up to stock farm. You leave, you go home. Who knows? Who knows? Let's suppose you go from Grand Bay and you decide, well, I'm making a fresh start. I'm going to Capuchin now. Do people in Capuchin know that you're in stock farm? Except if somebody gives them a little tip, that's the state's responsibility. There should be a sex offender registry. We have to put things in the environment to decrease this stuff because perpetrators will not stop themselves. Many of them will tell you they cannot stop themselves. So we as the community have to stop them. And when we get an opportunity to stop them by actually enforcing the statutes, we have to do it. We have to do it. And if we dare send them home, somebody in the community ought to know that they're out there. We can't leave our kids as sitting ducks for these people who are telling you they cannot help themselves. Meaning, more likely than not, they're going to do it again. Meanwhile, kids go on, suffer the consequences of that trauma long term. They make less money. Their marriages are less likely to last. They're more likely to be addicted to drugs, which means they're less likely to be productive for your community and your society. So people with good brains, good brains, smart kids become these and start acting out their pain in your community. And you wonder, well, what happened to her? She used to be such a nice little girl. What happened to him? He used to be such a nice little boy. But we have to do those environmental protections. I love that the statute, like Ms. Dalrymple says, is so robust. I would add a few things. One of the pieces I keep hearing about is that 16-year-old ability to give consent. Well, that sounds, listen, we don't want them to vote at 16, do we? We tell them they cannot vote. Why? We don't think they are enough to make that kind of decision. Hmm? We say, wait a couple more years. Do we think really, as potent as sex is, that they can say yes to sex? Do you know sex is one of the most deadly forces on this planet? How many people have killed for sex, killed themselves for sex? Huh? How many people hurt themselves, hurt other people, become addicted, end up in the psych unit over sex, die in childbirth? Sex is a potent force. Huh? You're going to give access to that to a 16-year-old who cannot even balance a checkbook? Huh? Who you don't want to vote? 16, you think that's okay? You think you sound right? 16, it's okay. The law is robust, but we need more. Come on, y'all. Like, come on. Like, who are we doing that for? Who are we doing that for? And what kind of argument can we come up with that really makes sense to say that 16 is okay?
Do not advise parents of guardians that, you know what, go and see the DPP and take out that matter from the system. I don't like the child coming to court. No, there are ways and means that these matters can be fought and our minors can get justice. Yes, we spoke also of grooming. Grooming is an offense under the Sexual Offences Act, and it carries the weight of 14 years imprisonment. With grooming also comes certain other grooming type offenses, which is procuring a minor to have sexual intercourse, procuring a minor to be engaged in prostitution. So we have all sorts of offenses under the Act. And again, our Act is the most comprehensive. I boast our Sexual Offences Act in the region. So it's time that we start using it.
Miss Dalrymple, if I was close to you, I would shake your big toe. We need to start using it. We need to start implementing it and enforcing it. And I, for one, I'm not going to stop talking about this. I'm not going to stop talking about this. We are small enough that it's not going to take much for us to fix this problem. All you got to do is make an example of a couple. Sexual predators are very, I'm going to say, um, very smart, very sharp. They're very uh, intuitive. They're very intuitive. It will not take long for the system to really make an example out of a couple. A couple, okay? Quickly. Don't dilly dally with this stuff. The law is clear. If the law is that, if the law is that clear, if the law is that clear, then implement it. Implement it if it's that clear, and implement it quickly. Quickly. The delay is not a positive. That's too much time for the two. We are too short, too flam, which is not. I say that, but I don't think that's a negative, and I don't think that's abnormal. I think human beings. There's no way for your brain to maintain that level of passion, of rage, you know, without end. Emotions must give way to other emotions. So you do need a certain kind of righteous anger to pursue, to give you the force, to give you the energy to pursue a case legally. It's also costing money. If the family is out in Boetica, they got to get money to come up to wherever their court is. I don't know where their court is. Hmm? So it costs a lot of money over time. And the longer we stretch it out, it's less comfortable it is for families to actually see it through to the end. Hmm? I would give her, I would shake her hand. Her presentation to me was quite thorough, and she was doing the best she could with this right here. The law in 2016, I am very grateful that it added many things, including that mandated reporting. Uh, uh, it's not a recommendation, no, but it's a must. Now, have we educated the mandated reporters? And if they don't follow through and we find out, do we enforce the penalty? That's the only way. Only way. And again, I get that it's hard because we're so small and everybody knows everybody. But you have to identify a few people in the community who you think are at least can hold a righteous stance either way and can do that stuff with love. But it's got to be done. It has got to be done for the sake of that 6-year-old who cannot sleep tonight, who's having nightmares and flashbacks and wetting their bed, who's having panic attacks, terrified, who's afraid to go to the little shop to buy a little packet of corn kernels because they're afraid they'll see that person on the street. This is not just a thing in the fantasy or in the mind, it's real life for so many people, so many children. And we have a responsibility. I'm sorry, we cannot run from it. Parents cannot, teachers cannot, the police cannot run from the responsibility. And if, I'm saying if, but I already know the answer to that. Many police on the island are themselves easily identified as predators, as groomers of young children. Then that means that the administration, yeah, the human resources of the force need to educate and train their staff properly. And when their people violate, they have to do the next thing, which is the next right action. 1 plus 1 is 2. So if you do that, this is the result. But you have to, again, people like that are not going to change just so. They're not just going to change just because you want them to change or because you had a talk with them. That's not how it gets done. Okay? That is not how it gets done. It gets done with consequences. That's it. It gets done with pain. That's just it. So there she's done with her presentation, and Minister Blackmore
Madam DPP, I think that was
adds a
a
little
brilliant
piece.
presentation. I really want to thank you for that. Um, I think the topic of grooming, particularly, I was waiting to hear you speak of that because I don't think that we have enough of a cognizance of what grooming is and the forms that it can take. And I know that one of the popular elements of grooming is that people don't only groom the children, but sometimes they groom everyone around the children to kind of turn a blind eye to the abuse. So I think it's very important that we have these discussions and get out of our comfort zone and talk about these types of things. Um,
So I'm just going to go over a few examples of what grooming looks like. Grooming really is a process by which a rapist, an abuser gets to a child. It's just what they do. It's a process. It's things. Sometimes it's hard to identify it when it's happening because you're just interacting with another human being. Yeah, and often these people are very charming, slick. You can call it slick, but when you're dealing with a person like that, usually you're not thinking they're slick. You just think, oh, they're funny, or they're just, you know, you enjoy talking to them because they're good at that. So, grooming might include stuff like giving gifts or paying special attention to a child or a young person or to their parents. Many of these people actually they attack. I say attack because it is a psychological attack on the parents. They're there, they're your friend, they become the parents' bon gens. Bon gens is good people. Yeah, they become some source of support, financially, emotionally, whatever, for the parent. And that because once you do that, you neutralize the parent. You neutralize the person who's going to protect the child. And again, they do that by either making the child or the parent feel indebted to them or cared for by them or special somehow. They might make close physical contact, like tickling or playing with or wrestling with or play fighting. Or hey, come sit next to me. Come, a lot of physical touch is involved in a playful way, again to break down your natural defenses. No, except if it's a violent assault, you know, these groomers know I don't want to be. It's really crazy. It's not. It is crazy. Many of these people don't want you to look at them in a negative way. They don't want you to think that they're bad. See, a rapist is bad. Un violet, nobody wants to be called an un violet. That's like the lowest of the low. But the groomer is the one who, that's a nice guy. The groomer is a nice guy, a jokey jokey, a flirty flirty. You never sure, where they're coming from. Are they serious or not? In the beginning, it's like that. You're like, huh? That felt weird, but am I supposed to be feeling weird about it? Yes, you are. If you're feeling weird about it, if your child says they're feeling weird about it, that's all you need to hear. It doesn't mean either that the person has negative intentions towards them, but what I'm saying is what your child says is what you go on as a parent. Some of these people will openly or pretend to just accidentally brush up against the child or a young person, just rub up against them, or they might expose themselves to them, or they might show them pornography. Okay? Now, that in and of itself is visual sexual abuse. Okay? Or they might go as far as hooking themselves so well to the child, who again, under 16, under 18, these kids don't really know how to reason stuff. Some of these people will actually threaten young people and children, threaten them. If you say, I will do XYZ to your mother, to your father, to your grandmother, to your brother, to your cat, to your dog, and if you say, I'm meeting you in the dark and I'm giving you a bowling, threats. Someone actually make threats. So you want to look at your kids' phones, their social media, see who they're interacting with. You want to know. You want to know because these days, with the advent of cell phones and social media, look, and many parents are not open with this. Open meaning they're not well versed on social media. You know how many people have hooked up with your kids on Snapchat and Instagram? As an adult, listen to me. Like it's one of the worst, most yucky things in the world. Is to have random people. They just send you stuff in your DM. They just send you stuff. Random, ugly stuff. Sometimes it's not ugly. It's like, hey, how are you? I'm like, you just asked me to block you. I don't know. So does your child know that? Have you taught your child to do these things? So parents have a responsibility. You have the primary responsibility. It's our job to teach our kids from day one. And once they start going to school, teachers have that responsibility too. So parents, teachers, caregivers, guardians, if the child is you're the one who's taking the kids on a field trip, you're the one that's the mandated reporter. You must say something if a child tells you, oh, so and so did XYZ. So I want to say thank you to the minister and Ms. Dalrymple for showing up and presenting yourselves to the community because that's what we are. We're community. We're community. It's not an us, this is them. It's a we. And all of us have the high goal of Dominica making progress and our community feeling safe and feeling comfortable for us, but especially for our kids because they cannot do much by themselves for them. So we have to put in the environment in our laws. Okay, I get with the laws. I love the statutes. Again, I would add, make sure we have our religious and our clergy on that list of mandated reporters. And I would add, 16 is not old enough for anybody to say yes to sex. And for that to be like illegal, yeah, it's okay. That doesn't make much sense. Mm, that doesn't make much sense. I would say that the paper committals, that system where the kids do not have to show up in court in front of their predators, in front of a person who might have done the most heinous things to them, to stand up in front of an adult and in front of other adults to talk about your body. It is gross for a child. So if you can right away get back to doing those paper committals, and again, I would love for the community to hear when that system has started again. Show up and communicate with your public and tell them, yes, your children can feel safer now because that paper committal system is back. We started it on July 31st because the people need to know. I also think we will not be able to protect many children unless we have a sex offender registry. Once there's been a conviction, once there's been a conviction, that person's name should go on the list. That person's name should go on the list. Over here, you even have apps on your phone that can tell you there's a sexual offender within 20 feet of you. If you have a kid, you need to know this. If you have a child, you need to know this. We pour so much into our children. You don't want somebody just coming and destroying their complete. I mean, that kind of stuff interferes for generations to come in. For generations to come. And that perpetrator might be a lost cause by now. If you don't want your child to be added to that list of lost causes, of people who cannot give the country their best because they're so burdened by emotional and psychological pain that could have been avoided. So again, sex offender registry. And we're not saying, you know, before they get convicted, after they get convicted. 16 is too young. It's too young to vote. It's too young for them to be able to legally say yes, like that. All of us know this because we have been 16 before. You were 30 years old, still trying to figure out, oh my God, this relationship business. Telling me at 16? And stop with the Mary and Joseph bull caca. Knock it off. It was a different system then. Don't come to me with this, oh Mary and Joseph. That is thought, please. Knock it off. Knock it off. Olivia, you say it's a sad topic. It is. It, it's a frustrating topic too because, like for me, I already know that perpetrators, people who do this stuff, they don't change. It's not. They don't change. Many of, like some of them will get married and have their own kids, and sometimes that stops them for a little while, keeps them busy for a little while. But these are people who tend to go back to. They tend to go back to. Winsty, I agree. She did a great job. She did a great job explaining the laws and the statutes. Again, I think every system has to aim to get better and better and better and to refine, refine, refine. It seems like 2016, a lot was accomplished. But again, like I said, we need a sex offender registry so that when that 22-year-old goes back home after his second time, because he's getting a second chance to go home, the people in Woodford, he'll need to know that joker right there is on the National Sex Offender Registry. Keep your kids away from him. Okay? We can be nice to him, but he does not have to come close to our daughter or our son. Hi, David. You're on the job. You're in Douglas. How are you? Franklin, Sakafet, Sakafet. Winsty, you said a parent has a moral responsibility, absolutely, to endure every hardship that comes when it comes to getting justice for your child. That's what, I mean, nature puts you and nobody else in charge of that job. And that child did not ask for you to come find them. You went to look for the child. So handle your business. It doesn't matter if it gets tough. There's no getting fed up. That's right. Life comes to us. Life doesn't tell us, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. It just brings its shafts and its stress and its events. And we just have to deal with it. You have to deal with it. So if that's what comes to your doorstep, that is what you have to deal with. You got to buckle up, grow up, and deal with it. That's it. David, you said, you bet if it was one of the lawyers, a judge or a magistrate kid that happens to, yeah, you do stuff, you enforce. You would make sure it was enforced. So we have to be fair. You would make sure it was enforced, and you would make sure throw the book at him. So why not throw the book? at the person who tries to do that to my child or to the formerly raised child. That's why we have to try our best to stay as close to the rules as possible without our emotions getting involved in our relationships and our connections and oh my heart breaks for you, I giving you a second chance. I keep hearing this nonsense that the lawyers are using as an argument. Oh, he's the father of five. If he was a damn father of five, if he didn't know that before he did this to this child, he's a father of five, but he does this to somebody else's child. You think he didn't know he was a father of five? We have to do better on this. I think we know what to do. We know what to do. We know what to do. So we have to do it. The statutes are beautiful. They're nice. Hmm, they're nice. We got to now implement consistently. Consistently because we've been out of order for so long on this that it's mushrooming into this kind of a boil, you know? So you have to now make a correction, and become so consistent with it now that it becomes predictable. When you increase the predictability of these sentences from this robust law, then you have people who are they're very into their self-preservation, predators. They really take good care of themselves. They know how to hide. They know how to couch things. So that's what you're gonna need for a predator to think twice. They are not gonna think twice because they had a good they slept well and they had a insight from the Lord. Don't look that way. It's the consequences that keep them in check. And even when there are consequences, if you're lax, if you're sometimes, look, seriously, at this point, I'm encouraging the fathers of Dominica to become more involved in the lives of their children in a very, very, very personal way. Those of you who are not, so that I will say it so that only you understand, so that uka panchu non kivle ovule zon. Panchu you. That is my clinical recommendation. Panchu you. Avant you alle devant and the magistrate and the lawyer and everybody. Pan boda you first. All that 6 years you take in there for cases to call, pan boda you. Mawe yo kon yo mawe zanfan ou evek pan boda you. Mete yo an fon me. That's my clinical recommendation. Andy, I agree with you. The DPP is doing her part faithfully. She's consistent with her oath. Yeah, I found her to be very professional and thorough. I think she was doing the best she can. I think she's doing the best she can. I'm sure there's always room for improvement. I don't know everything, but I appreciated the fact that she and um, Mr. Blackmore showed up because this is a serious issue, and we are serious people. We are serious people. We've always been a serious people. We're not cautioning, we're not playing. We've always been a serious people. So we're not toys. It's a serious problem. It's got to be addressed as a serious problem and find some serious solution together as a community. All this one hale and pala, hale and pala, hale and pala, hale, hale, hale. What is that? Where are we going to go with that? We've always been a serious people. So essentially, I'm saying, let's remember who we are. Okay. Can you imagine when she says, exactly, some of the stepdads and even dads molest, yep, and they're being protected by broken women, exactly. Now, that's where now the mandated reporting rule must be enforced because if this mother whose self-esteem is so low decides to not report what her spouse does to the minor, they can face up to $50,000. The thing is, the system now must implement the law and enforce the law. It's there on the books. You've got to do it so people realize you're serious. You have to do it. A judge has to do very difficult things sometimes, very painful. Remember how Solomon said to the two women who didn't want to agree about the little baby, well, hey, I'm just going to have to slice it in half. What you want? What you going to do now? Hmm? Sometimes you have to make those kinds of decisions. You say some people prevent biological fathers from spending time with their children, using the courts sometimes to help with the game while our kids are growing. Yeah, that's a whole other subject that needs to be addressed. And when little Kanisha's story came out, that showed its ugly head. That showed its ugly head. We have to get back to doing things properly. Get back to it. Glenda, yes, there's got to be a registry because again, a lot of these predators have a lot of it's it's a lot of it's narcissism is what it is, which shows itself as pride, but it's a fragile ego. So they love to be loved. They love to be loved. Okay, so to put their name on something like that, it's a big deterrent. To think that their name could be on something like that is one of the last straw deterrents, like last resort deterrent. That's right, Glenn, the father of five. As if that means something. Why did it not mean something when he was hurting this other person's child? There's another father of five, and he was hurting their child. You are welcome, Glenda. And see, one recommendation to the DPP is to spend more time because when you hear something one time, you need more than that to learn. How long did it take you to learn your ABCs? And what did they have to do so you could learn your ABCs? Every day you went into school. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S. Every day. Every day. The first time you sang it, you didn't remember it. Same thing for these laws. Same thing. So if you say, oh, in 2016 we passed this statute, well, am I regularly educating my public? Because now I really have a public health crisis. It's a public health crisis. And if you had a malaria breakout or a dengue breakout or yellow fever or when COVID broke out, we spent a lot of time with radio ads, hmm, people coming up to talk about COVID, how to protect yourself, how to stay safe. This is the same thing. It's got to be approached from that angle. I went down to Dominica in the middle of COVID, and a cop almost arrested me for going to bathe in the sea because it was against the rules then. You had to stay inside. You couldn't go out in the sea. I wasn't going to be touching anybody, and he was ready to arrest me. No, because they were trying to keep everybody safe. It's the same thing. So if the statutes are there, we have to do more to educate the public. Put up billboards. Put up billboards on the way from Ozo to Portsmouth, on the eastern side. Say somewhere where you know many people, most people must pass. Put two billboards up. Hmm? That way you educate your public. I mean, these laws, you heard the words, you're like, even the DPP was running over some words. It's a lot of words in this, it's legalese. It's a lot of words in these documents. So distill it into something catchy. Put it up on a billboard. Educate the public. It is that important. Yeah, David, at this point, yes, yes. If it's taking them so long and when they do come up with it suspended sentences, hormone deserve a volet. How on this overvolé? Absolutely. Fan chuyo, fan bodayo. Okay? Repetition, you need repetition. You need to see it. Some of us are visual learners. We have to see it. Show us something to remind us. Oh, I forgot it, you know. Oh, that reminds me. Now that I see it, oh, yes, let me do it. Oh, I have to remember to talk to my child this weekend. You got to do it. Once you say if you molest one child, you can't raise five, period. You know? Hi, Moisey. How are you? How are you? Yes. So I'm going to end tonight by saying we're such a beautiful country. Like, seriously, there's none other, like Dominica. And that beauty has to be felt by by all the people, by all the people. And our kids are our most vulnerable. They're also our richest treasure because they're the seeds that we're planting for. Look, we come in all, in white hair, you know, bags under the eyes, yes, sir, eh? Wrinkles start commencer. You understand? We're transitioning. We had to pour the best into our kids so we set ourselves up for a beautiful future. We can't just leave them like that, just exposed to whatever, and then we'll deal with the consequences. No, there are a lot of things we can prevent. Prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than cure. Okay? So continue to speak to your power rep and tell them we expect them to make a big deal out of this. We expect them to make a big deal out of this. And if they're the ones out of order, we are calling all of them out right now. You are out of order. Regulate yourself. Regulate yourself. Regulate yourselves because let me tell you, today you Chubby says someone was out there. Today you might be in a position to where you can groom and really take advantage of other people's children, but you do not know where you're going to be tomorrow. You don't know. So it's time for everybody to ask themselves a question, regulate, get back online. All right? Okay. This is my offering for tonight. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate you. And I will see you another time. Peace.